Quick question. Do you know the difference between a personal brand and a leadership brand? Most people don't, and it actually matters. Now, your personal brand is what people think about you. Your leadership brand, though, that's about the impact that you create. It's how you lead, it's how you think, it's your philosophy, the change that you're making visible in the world. I have a gift for you because each week I teach an absolutely free class called the Leadership Brand Class, where I walk you through our leadership brand methodology. We help you close the gap between the impact that you are already making in your career and your business and how visible that impact actually is. Because here's the truth. Visibility without substance is just noise. But impact without visibility, that's a missed opportunity. And most leaders that we work with are on the wrong side of that equation. So join me at leadershipbrandclass.com. It's free, it's every week, and it will change how you think about your leadership and how others think about you so that you're compensated for the impact that you actually create.
Most times people think that we're just responding to what's happening, but most times we're constructing the response. The best organizers know how to organize themselves out of a job. If I'm responsible for 100 people, my job is not to do everything for myself. Power in its essence is really your ability to control the valued resources. I feel disconnected because I don't feel like I can ever be vulnerable and say I don't know.
The test of your leadership is if someone, another leader or manager, were to walk into the room with you and your team, that person could not tell who the leader in the room is.
Power is oftentimes perceived as this positional word. When we really start to call the thing, we will understand what power we have and how to leverage it for the good.
Welcome to the Let's Thrive Together podcast, where we are sharing real stories of real leaders thriving not only in their career in business, but also in your life. I'm your host, Brittany N, keynote speaker, author of Thrive Through It, and the CEO of Career Thrivers, where we work with executives and organizations to build bold leaders and resilient teams. Welcome back to the Let's Thrive Together podcast. We have a very special guest that's joining us today. I've been wanting to have this conversation on the podcast for a while because as leaders, what we are talking about today is often an area that gets left out of the leadership conversation, and that is your and mine, our civic responsibility. So welcome to the show, Tequila Johnson.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's talk about, you are obviously a well-known leader, not just in the city, not just in the state of Tennessee, but you are a global leader. And so I want to first ask you, tell me about the first time you remember stepping into a leadership role, whether you were voluntold or you volunteered for it.
Yes, I'm so glad I had some time to reflect because up until a few years ago, it took me a while to accept the responsibility and the calling of being a leader. So even though people acknowledge me as a leader, I never thought about my leadership journey. But I can say I've been a Girl Scout, I've been in sports, I've always done things. So I've always been in a leadership capacity in some way. But I think my first time being a civic leader was in high school. I graduated from Chattanooga Central High School, and my high school was a majority white high school. My best friend told me that she wanted to run for Miss Central. There had never been a Black woman that was Miss Central. And my other friend at the time said she wanted to run for homecoming queen, and there had never been a Black homecoming queen at our high school. So I joined student council and I joined class marshals because those were the areas that were responsible for making sure students voted on who was the homecoming queen and Miss Central. And for, I think about a year or so, or a little bit less than a year, I went around to every homeroom trying to get as many people as possible to vote for my friends. Like I went to all the student council meetings and the marshal meetings to learn about the process and to tell them like, hey, this is how the process works. This is what we need to do. So I think back to my journey as a civic leader, and it actually started in high school.
I love that. I've never heard that story from you. I love that. And I love that so often, like when we think back to our childhood, there's a through line. There's always a through line. And you're like, oh my gosh, this has always been here. Like maybe not the same representation of it today as an adult, but like, oh my gosh, like you were doing then essentially what you are doing now.
Absolutely.
I love that. So you've built a really powerful track record as a civic leader, from organizing to building a multi-million-dollar company that is responsible for a lot of the shifts that we're seeing across the state. And so tell me about how you translate that experience to your day-to-day as a leader in your business.
Absolutely. I think oftentimes when we think about leadership, we want to assign a certain aesthetic, a certain, lane, so to speak, to it. But leadership encompasses a lot of different things. And as the CEO of a civic organization, one of the things that I think has helped me in both for-profit and nonprofit world as a leader is we work for impact and not optics. So that means that a lot of my work is very intentional, it's very targeted, and it's very metric focused. So we are, most times people think that we're just responding to what's happening, but most times we're constructing the response, right? We're constructing the situation to respond to it. So we have, we're doing 5, 10, 15, 20-year forecasting, scenario planning, strategic planning, budgeting, fundraising, everything that you would do in a day-to-day business, we're doing as civic leaders in a nonprofit. So one of the ways that I translate that leadership into my role is by making sure that everyone understands what is happening. And I say that because oftentimes what I see from people in leadership roles and capacities in small businesses is most people don't understand where we're going. They know what they're responsible for in the moment, but when you think about the long-term vision that is required to keep and sustain staff momentum, keep and sustain what we say is people power, but what we would say in the for-profit world is what sales power, customer power, is making sure that everybody is going in the same direction and understand what the destination is.
Yeah. Talent engagement came to mind for in the corporate space. But that's so powerful. And you've obviously done that well because you actually had the opportunity to take some time off on sabbatical. And I think sometimes when we are talking about what is the hallmark truly of leadership in the traditional sense, to put it shortly, it's being able to cultivate other leaders. Meaning if you were to, I'll always remember I had a manager, his name is Kevin, at Pfizer, who would say, the test of your leadership is if someone, another leader or manager, were to walk into the room with you and your team, that person could not tell who the leader in the room is.
Absolutely.
And I used to be like, it took me a while, especially early in my career, like, okay, what exactly do you mean? Well, they would know who the leader is because the leader's running the meeting. He's like, no, that's my point. You wouldn't know who the leader is because the leader raises the capacity of the entire team. Talk to us a little bit about what that process was like for you in order for you to have a organization of leaders to where you could step away for 3 months.
Absolutely. I started out in this work as an organizer, which is like basement level. And in organizing 101, the first thing they teach you is the best organizers know how to organize themselves out of a job. And essentially what that means is if I'm responsible for, let's say, building an event and I need to get 100 people there, my job is not to do everything for myself. My job is to find volunteers, supporters, or whomever to take on pieces of that work and actually own pieces of that work. So being an organizer really taught me the human behavior around how to cultivate and how to build leaders. And that's what really allowed me the opportunity to be able to go on sabbatical. When we first started the Equity Alliance, it was myself and 5 other Black women. All those women now are sitting elected officials. So when it got down to just myself and my other ED at the time, I realized that the organization had been built around us and our brands and our presence. And my first order of duty when she was successful at her running for office was to bring other people in the fold. And what that looked like was not just figuring out what we needed from my perspective, but hosting innovation sessions with my staff to figure out where were my gaps, what were the things that I weren't as good at, and what were they good at, what gaps could they fill. And just that empowerment from giving people a sense of ownership over the trajectory of the organization and our vision and our mission, it cultivated leadership from the inside out. Yeah. It gave people the opportunity to see themselves as leaders. It put people in the mindset of feeling like they were just as responsible and accountable to the organization as I was. And I think that was the most transformative thing that I learned as a young leader, because I've been in leadership since I was in my 20s, like 21. So that was one of the things that I learned as a young leader.
Yeah, that is so good. It's so powerful and so necessary. If I asked you right now, on a scale from 1 to 10, how strong is your leadership brand? Most people would just guess, but you don't have to. We've created the Leadership Brand Assessment to give you an actual score on where you stand, your impact, your visibility, and the gap between those two. Because that gap, the distance between what you've built and what the world actually sees, that's where your influence is hiding, and that's where your income is hiding too. That's where your next opportunity is waiting. And it only takes 3 minutes. It's absolutely free, and it'll tell you exactly where to focus next. So take the assessment now at scoremyleadershipbrand.com. Let me take a step back, right? Because I'm assuming right now in this moment, I speak for myself, that everyone that is listening, this global audience of listeners that we have in this podcast knows the Equity Alliance. So talk to us a little bit about, like, what is the Equity Alliance? You mentioned you and 5 Black women started it. What is the Equity Alliance?
Sure. So the Equity Alliance, we started in 2016 as a social justice nonprofit organization with one goal in mind, and that was to increase civic engagement amongst unrepresented communities. And the purpose of that was to create self-determination in these communities so that they could identify one and also build the leadership needed to be the change they wanted to see. Since we have transformed into a multi-entity organization with chapters across the state, building something that has not been built before in the way that it's being built in Tennessee. And a lot of the work that we do is centered around cultural, economic, and political power. And I use that word power as the ability to govern and control resources. So I know oftentimes when people in the business world hear power, they immediately think about disruption. And disruption is a form of power, but power in its essence is really your ability to control the valued resources. And for us, that is our culture, that is our money, and that is our political determination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you think about that, especially as it relates to the economic side of things, how do you connect the dots for people on how civic engagement helps with economic development?
I mean, I tell you right now, if you are looking at what's happening in the country and you're questioning why, follow the dollars. In 2010, the federal Supreme Court essentially passed a law that said corporations were equal to people. And that case was Citizens United. And what that did was it allowed corporations to be able to use their money and their buying power in elections. And what we've seen over the last 10 years is corporations have literally started buying off elections. Right now, as it stands, 100 people spend more in elections than everybody else in the country combined. And so what that says is that our governing power, our government has a lot of control, whether that be through regulation, whether that be through government contracting, whatever, over tariffs, all the things we're seeing now that are impacting businesses. Those decisions are made through both federal, state, and your local municipalities in terms of government. And one of the things that I am very passionate about, which is why I founded several PACs over the years, is getting small business owners, women folk, Black folk, queer folk, people who don't usually have a seat at the business tables, to understand how their economic and social power and capital can directly impact politics, and how those political influences can have a direct impact over their businesses. And it's been transformative for me, but also for a lot of leaders who've been brought in the fold that are starting to learn about how these different boards and commissions govern simple things that we complain about, like nightlife, right? How these boards and commissions govern where things are going to be on a transit line and how that may or may not impact their businesses. Seeing these billionaires, I read a statistic that said Elon Musk gets about $8 billion a day in contracting from the federal government. So we see Elon Musk putting in, a couple $100 billion into the election, and we think like, wow, why would he do that? The return on investment for 4 years is almost quadruple. So imagine what we could do if we put a couple $100,000 into a local election. Imagine the return we would get.
Yeah, that's you got my mind over here just going. And I think you're right, because there can be so much apathy when it comes to civic engagement. I'm curious on your thoughts about why that is, but I could not agree with you more that we are sitting in a time where I think, at least for our generation, it's very clear that it is politics that runs business. And so when we think about our personal life, every aspect of our personal life is really controlled by public policy. So you can decide to sit out, but that just means you're saying it's okay for someone else to make these decisions, or for me not to have a say. Why do you think that people can be a bit apathetic when it comes to politics and civic engagement?
So I'll tell you a story. In 2018, I led the Tennessee Black Voter Project, where we actually registered 80,000 Black people to vote. And as we were registering voters, we came across a plethora of Black men who just were really apathetic to the process. Mm-hmm. So we put together a focus group where we brought these different Black men from different socioeconomic statuses and backgrounds and age ranges. We brought them in a room and we simply asked them, why do you feel so disengaged from the civic and political process? And everybody was going around the room and they were pointing fingers, and it got a little heated. And the youngest guy, I believe he was 18 at the time, stood up and said, I feel disconnected because I don't feel like I can ever be vulnerable and say I don't know. And one of the things that is the hardest for me to understand is how, why, and when politics moves in the way that it moves. So rather than being vulnerable and saying I don't know, I'll just disengage and say I don't like it. And that really is what opened my eyes to the need for political education, but not in this radical, let's burn down the system, let's disrupt way. Yes, that is necessary, but also in a diagnostic perspective, if you may. Like, what is the system actually doing? And what exists within that system that can be of benefit to me? And how do I access that benefit? And what skills, what tools, what resources, what relationships are needed for me to access that benefit? And I don't think that we talk about politics as a benefit to people. I think we talk about it as a nuance, right? Like, you're not able to get what you need done because all these bad things are happening. Instead of saying all these bad things are happening because people like you who would do these things for good have not been engaged yet.
Yeah. And talk about what engagement looks like, because I think some people think engagement is just voting. Some people hear the word engagement and they're like, oh, that means I need to run for office or something. Like, when you're saying civic engagement, like, what does that include?
Sometimes civic engagement is exactly what we're doing right now. It is having a conversation. That's one of the biggest tools of civic engagement, is listening to learn. And most times when people hear politics, it impacts you so personally and so deeply that we oftentimes forget that the cornerstone of democracy is people. And people exist in a human state, and we're all having a human experience. But I think that the biggest piece to that is like making sure people understand that in order for them to really, really be civically engaged, you have to understand what's happening. So even if you just understand who the people are that represent you at the ground level, that is like, I think, one of the easiest ways to enter into it and to be civically engaged. And then another way that we don't talk about in the Black community is your dollars. I mean, every white billionaire has a political action committee, a committee on the federal, state, and local level in every state that they are using to directly impact politics. And as Black people, we oftentimes aspire to be wealthy without actually thinking about the tools that are required to be wealthy. And political power is one of those tools. Yeah. So even when I sit down with wealthy Black folk, they're not talking about civic engagement from how do we get what we are needed or what is owed to us or what we feel we deserve or what we've earned. They're talking about penetrating other tables, right? And part of what civic engagement requires is you setting the table. You realizing like, hey, Brittany, we're women. We care about this, and this. What needs to be said at our table in order for people to access our influence and our votes to get where they want to get?
Yeah. And I would say too, I think the belief, particularly for like mid-career folks or people who work in corporate environments or like are in the business community, sometimes you hear things like, we don't talk about politics. We don't want things to get too political. And I think what people oftentimes miss is sometimes that is an intentional strategy to keep you civically disengaged, because I guarantee you every executive of that organization, absolutely the C-suite of your Fortune 500 company, is daily talking about politics. They're paying lobbyists like you to make sure that policies are in alignment with the business growth strategy, meaning the EBITDA of the organization, so that that organization can continue to thrive. And so I think sometimes there's this lack of understanding that, like, no, politics actually does matter. You may not be able to talk about it at entry level, but the executives are talking about that at the top of the agenda.
Absolutely. I think about it all the time. You mentioned lobbying, and every time I have ever lobbied, it has never been for a young or Black company or entrepreneur. It has always been older white gentlemen who on paper would not agree with my politics, but understand that they need my influence and are willing to pay for me to go and talk to people who I have helped get elected to ensure that whatever it is that they value and that their self-interest or business interest is either protected or considered. And I think that's something that we as young folk, especially as people of color and women folk, we don't do enough, because we see power as a dirty word, right? The only time I hear us talk about power in this abundant mindset is when we're speaking from a disruptive perspective. But power, like I keep saying, is control of value. And if we aren't thinking about what our people need and what we value, then we're not really building power. We're building a facade.
Yeah. So let's have a civic engagement one-on-one.
Okay.
Session for a minute. We've said the word lobby. For the person that's like, I have no idea what that means, what that is. Like, I may not want to put it in the comments of the YouTube video. Like, what is lobbying in its simplest form?
So I'll say two things. First, I understand as a corporate person, I've worked in a corporate environment before, that certain conversations, you cannot have certain things you are afraid to be attached to because it will impact your livelihood. And that is why they have invented several different non-profit IRS codes so that you can hide money. One of them, which we have as the Equity Alliance, is a 501c4. And these are political lobbying organizations that are considered dark money organizations, primarily because you don't have to disclose your donors. So there are several donors that are donating to C4s that we may be out here supporting, but they're donating to these C4s that will go and influence political decisions on their behalf without ever having to disclose that the money came from them. So there are tools that can help protect your identity while also making sure you protect your social and your, economic interests. Civics 101, you asked me, what is a lobbyist? Okay, so a lobbyist is someone who is registered to go to the government at either the federal, state, or local level and act on behalf of people, clients, or businesses to ensure that their political interests, and whatever their political interest is and why varies, but to make sure their political interests are valued or are considered. And their lobbying isn't just dirty. Like, there aren't just businesses lobbying. Like, I lobby on behalf of the people, right? I lobby to make sure voting rights are protected for Black people because that's something that I care about. The NAACP is a social welfare lobbying organization. Every college and university has a lobbyist, a registered lobbyist. Every major corporation in business has a registered lobbyist. I mean, the Disability Association has a registered lobbyist. You name it. I just had a friend who I worked and did community engagement for that was lobbying for a group of Black hairstylists because, as you know, they were trying to change the laws around Black hair and how we could or couldn't get licensed. And the Crown Act was just passed. So everybody who has a political interest, which is everybody, has a lobbyist.
Yeah, I love how you described that. I studied political science and communications at UT. I thought I was going to law school route. Got introduced to sales through Pfizer. And I thought for a brief moment, I'm like, well, I feel like the perfect merging of those two worlds would be becoming a lobbyist. But I am not a lobbyist yet, maybe.
Hey, don't tempt me with a good time. Don't tempt me with a good time. Because it's just a form you fill out.
Look at
And you
look,
pay like
look- look at-
$45.
I mean, even on the podcast, you're gonna get everybody tapped in.
I hope
Everybody
so.
all the way tapped in.
I tell my organizer and my activist friends all the time, if we don't start organizing our Black business elites, if we don't start organizing our corporate friends, we are going to give somebody else all of that power, because somebody else going to start organizing them.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the word power, and I think this is important for those that are listening, because especially even in the corporate context, we talk a lot about, positional power, people that have the title, the role, the executive level leaders. But then you have people within organizations who have very, very strong influential power, like relational power. They may or may not have the title to go with it, but they can move and maneuver within an organization. Talk to us a little bit about how you've cultivated power on your leadership journey. I would consider you now someone to be like someone who has not only influential power, but positional power as well. But how have you cultivated that through the years?
So, I recently got certified at Harvard to teach power building, to talk about power building. And we studied Machiavelli and Machiavelli's definition and perception around power. And the first thing that he says is power isn't positional. Power, the definition of power via Machiavelli, and Machiavelli trained all the way back to ancient leaders. This book is like the oldest book that talks about power in the world. He defines power as the ability to control the most valued resource. And I remember in one of my classes, we were picking who we thought had power on a chart. And most people immediately picked the CEO. And we found out through an assimilation that we did that the CEO really didn't have much power in terms of influence, because the CEO had positioned himself away from all of the mechanics of the organization. It was his assistant who knew where all bodies were buried, who knew everybody's schedule, and so power oftentimes is perceived as positional, but most times we overlook the value of what it is we are attaching to said power. So I think that as the CEO of the Equity Alliance, while it may be perceived that I have positional power, my power isn't really positional, because a CEO of a nonprofit is not regarded in the same light as CEO of a major Fortune 500 company. My power is influential because I have people who I've cultivated real relationships with that actually listen to me and that I can influence because I have gained that trust from them. I also have power because I know how to impact politics. So you may have more money than me, but it's easy for me to figure out where your money is coming from and how your money is tied to a political decision, and go and get that political decision maker to make a decision that could negatively impact your money. So I think power is oftentimes perceived as this, like, either this dirty word, this positional word, or this like morally consciously focused word. And it's really about resource. And I believe that when we really start to call the thing, we will understand what power we have and how to leverage it for the good.
Yeah, and I think that level of assessment, especially I'm thinking about, two groups of our listeners. One, the working professional that likely is in a hierarchical organization culture, where, again, that sense of positional power is often assumed to be with the person that has the biggest title in the role, and sometimes can miss that level of influential power. But the other group that I'm thinking about are entrepreneurs, from a business development perspective. And I have that lens because I spent 9 years in sales at Pfizer. But to your point, sometimes it is the receptionist, sometimes it is the EA. Sometimes it is the business manager that you might not even know is the spouse of the said positional power leader, whatever, that actually is the decision maker or can influence that end decision. And so I remember just from sales training, it's like you treat everybody as if they are the decision maker, because you really don't know oftentimes as you're going in who holds that type of power. So you mentioned your certification with Harvard studying power. I know that you also are a global leader. You've spoken all over the globe. So I want you to talk a little bit about some of those experiences and how your experience as a leader when it comes to your global lens shapes your day-to-day as a business and civic leader.
You're listening in to the Let's Thrive Together podcast powered by Career Thrivers. Career Thrivers is a workforce development and leadership branding firm where we work directly with organizations, helping you with your organizational development strategy, but also your learning and development as you are building your next level leaders. If you are looking to retain top talent, inspire your leaders, or cultivate the leadership brands as executives within your organization, then make sure you head on over to careerthrivers.com to learn more about how you can work with us.
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to speak Germany, Africa, Abu Dhabi, all over the world. And that has really opened my eyes to the experiences across the country that I think sometimes we take for granted as leaders, especially as a woman. I've been in places where women weren't allowed to speak. I've been in places where I've had to cover myself and cover everything but my mouth to be able to speak. And, you know, I think that as women, oftentimes we show up and we're wearing that on our sleeves as though we're pushing against something. And one of the things that I have learned to do throughout this this period where I've been studying power, is to accept and acknowledge the power that I have. Because we will leave a lot of leverage on the table. We're focused on all the things that we don't have, and the things that we have are so massive and so life altering and so transformative. And we haven't even used the tools in our tool belt because we're worried about the things that we don't have. That's one thing. The other thing is it has given me a global lens on culture and community. I believe that when I first came into leadership as an African American, I always felt like I needed to either dial back or I needed to lose my cultural identity because it was a hindrance to me and my trajectory in the leadership lane. But traveling globally, one thing that I have seen in every country that I have been to, and I've been to over 40 countries, is Black American influence. Whether it be through hip hop, whether it be through fashion, whether it be through even the language and the way that they speak. When people see me as a Black woman in another country, I am an instant celebrity. Mm-hmm. And that level of influence that we have globally is so powerful. Like, I was the keynote speaker at a high school in Germany. The keynote speaker, right? And I have probably one of the most unapologetically, authentically Black platforms that you can have. And they wanted to hear that. So I tell people all the time, like, authenticity is not just about doing the thing in the face of people who don't want to see the thing because you know they don't want to see the thing. That's kind of inauthentic within itself too. That's kind of performative. To me, authenticity is recognizing the power you have and being able to stand firmly in that power and own that position.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about your transformation, and I want to dive into that just a little bit more.
A little vulnerability. Okay.
Just a little. And I'm a little biased because I know a little bit more.
I can do that.
Right? Because Tequila is one of our executive leaders that we get to work with in terms of her leadership brand. And so, but I think it's so important because oftentimes when people hear the word brand, they think aesthetic, they think surface, and that is not what we do. No. And that is not, like, brand is about belief. Like, make sure you check out the episode if you haven't checked it out already, where I talk about leadership branding. It's about belief, and it's about cultivating belief of other people, but you're only able to do that if you know what you believe.
Right.
If you know who you are. And sometimes it's always forever a journey, but then there are times where, whether it's moments of disruption in your life or just, you know, circumstances just come to a head where you have a transformational season where you're like, oh, wow, I see not only who I've been, but I see who I am, and I'm more clear than ever on who I'm becoming. So talk to us a little bit about what that journey has been like for you.
Oh, man. I have to take a breath on that because it has been one of the most uncomfortable times in my life. I think that I have always known what I believed, but I had never given myself permission to evolve into who I am becoming, right? Because my beliefs sometimes have been so much of, the northern star for me, that they have limited my evolution and the evolution of how I believe and why I believe what I believe. But one of the things that I think was so transformative was the opportunity to work with you, Brittany, and Career Thrivers, and experience that leadership transformation in real time, because I'm someone that is very confident and I'm very firm in what I believe and what I stand for. And while I was on sabbatical, I went through a spiritual transformation around just accepting that, okay, God, you have called me to move some mountains and I got a toothpick. You have called me to do some amazing, grand, big things, and I've never seen anybody do it before. You have called me to heights and to levels in my life that nobody in my lineage has ever experienced. And that is heavy, that is emotional, and that is transformative. But I couldn't figure out how I needed to show up in that, because it was something that, one, I had never seen, two, I was just accepting, and three, that I never had the safe space to feel vulnerable enough to explore. So I think I called you and told you that the day after that, and I'm getting emotional thinking about it. Oh God, not on live TV, hold it together. Okay. That leadership, I think you called it a leadership exploratory session, was transformative for me, because just the way you approached me and the way you approached that branding conversation, it didn't make me feel performative, which is a belief that I have. It didn't make me feel inauthentic, which is another strong belief that I have. And these are the reasons why I've shied away from putting myself out there. It's because I've always experienced in the political lane people putting themselves out there because they want something, right? But you allowed me to see that I'm not putting myself out there for something that I want to gain, but I'm putting myself out there because it is my divine right and it is a part of my purpose. And you helped me put words to what I was feeling and craft it in a way that was digestible to the people that were in my target audience. And I've been trying to figure that out for like 2 years, I'll be honest with you. And I never had that safe space. So one, I want to thank you for that. And I told you, God is moving through you. And I just hope that you see who you are and that you're stepping out there in the ways that you encourage me to.
We on the podcast, Tequila.
I
Thank
mean,
you for saying
that. We keeping it real on this podcast. So this is like
all the way,
not scripted. We really having a real conversation.
None of these the questions, so I might as well just we off the questions
at this point.
Questions for a minute. No, I appreciate you saying that, because it is a pivot. And similarly, like, I remember the download. I still have the
I don't want to see it,
the big Post-it note of like, are we, that's not what, but okay, I guess this is what it is. But you said the words, you said see, accept, and say. And I think before you can put anything on and you can do all the aesthetic stuff. You can hire the graphic designer, the marketing agency, and do all of those things, and it can be beautiful. But for it to truly be aligned with who you are, it requires those things for you to see yourself, all of who you are, not just what you want to make seen, but like for you to see all of who you've been, all of who God designed you to be, and the glimpses that he's showing you of who you're becoming, for you then to accept all of that. And like, that's a process, that's time, that's failures, that's mistakes, that's wins, like, but just, and I think so often leaders we're not even busy, we're distracted, if I'm being honest. Like, we just fill the day with things that are just, it's just like, do you not want white space? Like, do you really have to go to that meeting? Like, are you really meant to be a part of that board? It's like we fill our time with all these things, so you never have space to actually see it, so you can accept it, and then it's the being able to say it.
Absolutely, yeah. That was the most transformative piece of that journey for me, because like I said, I finally accepted it. I think one of the things that I realized in lane of this acceptance word was that I was good at being accepted, right? And I had gotten comfortable and built my leadership brand around what was accepted and what other people expected from me. I'm very charismatic. I'm very bold. I am all those things. I'm very strong. And that made me a very good activist and a very good disruptor. But those aren't my best skills. Those aren't the majority of the things that I've done to build up the Equity Alliance and its business brand. However, I showed up in that light because it was what people expected from me, and it was what people accepted me for. And I was good at it. And I made a name for myself doing it. And like I said, I've gotten hundreds of awards, and I'm a global speaker and all of these things. But I felt like here I am hiding my business acumen. Here I am hiding my fashion sense. Here I am hiding my charismatic personal nature and my relationship building skills, and the things that when I write down what I'm really good at, those are the things that come to my mind first. And those are the things that have made me the most money. And those are the things that I feel like have built the most relationships for me. But I had started to build a brand around acceptance. And sabbatical was that I knew before sabbatical that, and I've been wrestling with it for a few years, but sabbatical was the pause that I needed to like sit with the fact that I needed to show up really, really authentically, really, really radically, right? Radically in the sense of the joy that I possess. And that was going to be a shift, not just for me, but for people who knew me. Yeah. And I had to be okay with people not knowing me anymore, and people who still want to know me being reacclimated to me. And that is so uncomfortable as a leader. Because then I started feeling like, oh my God, am I going to fail now? Am I no longer going to be relevant? Am I no longer going to have a space in anything? Like, am I having to rebuild another thing from the ground up? Like, all of those things just sat with me. And as someone who is very business minded, I needed to see it on paper, and I needed to see the language associated with it. And you did that for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm ecstatic for you. I'm proud of you. What is something that you wish people knew about who you are now that they may not know?
So one of the things that I really thoroughly enjoy is I am extremely organized in my time. Like, my assistant, I don't even let my assistant manage my calendar like she wants to, because I am organized about my time. So one of the reasons why I do that is because I believe in intentionality and alignment. I thought before I went on sabbatical that I was burned out, but I was like, when I paused, I was like, I'm not really burned out. I just don't have any alignment and any balance. Working more than I party, writing more than I love, doing all the things that I need to do to fit what people expect from me, but not the things that I need to fill my cup up. And so for me, one of the things that I wish people knew is I am a therapist. I was a therapist. I have a master's in psychology and counseling. And that has kind of led me to this new journey that I'm on now around aligning my ambition. So, I'm launching a new business venture. My business partner, Brianna Hawkins, we are doing more personal development around how do you, as someone who has this big brand and all of these things, align that ambition to the things you want outside of that, right? And so one of those things that I do every year is I host a retreat for my friends. And I've done it for the last 7 years.
I love that.
And my friends have literally told me how transformative it has been for them and the things they've been able to accomplish, because we do our quarterly accountability check-ins and all of these things. And while I was on sabbatical, it was my best friend Blair, who she recently in 1 year got a PhD, bought a house, bought a car, like pretty much transformed, tripled her income, all these things. And she told me, like, you really helped me get here, because every year you almost forced us to intentionally plan out what we wanted. And I would have never thought about that if it had not been from you. You should do this bigger. Like, more women need this. And that really pushed me to say, okay, I'm going to make this a bigger thing.
I love that. That. So what are you given that looking forward to when you think about where your leadership journey is going?
What am I giving aligned ambition?
Well, just what are you looking forward to in your, with the Equity Alliance, with your new venture, in your life personally?
I'm looking forward to diversification. diversification of my dollars, amen. But also like diversification of who I am and my brand. I think I am finally at a place where I'm okay with people not liking something, or I'm okay with people talking about something, or people, not believing in something that I do. I just want to put forth all my multifaceted gifts and use them towards what I know my purpose is. And so putting those things out there is one thing I'm looking to. And I'm looking forward to building diverse relationships, meeting people. For years I've kind of been stuck in the political and in the business world, and I'm looking forward to like branching out and really meeting other people. I'm also looking forward to this new balance that I have internally of where I'm able to show up as this fierce, strong, vocal, bold leader, but also relish in this charismatic, compassionate, fashionable, loving woman that I am as well. So I'm just excited about what is next for me.
I love that. Well, we are excited for you too. My last question for you is going to be, of course, a civic leadership one. So given where we are in this environment, in our economy, I think even generationally, we're seeing, young people leverage their voice through the power of social media to scale beliefs, all of those things. How do you see the role of civic-minded leaders evolving now and in the future?
I really, truly believe and hope that leaders understand not just their civic duty, but their civic responsibility to be accountable to the people that they serve, their customer base, and to our communities. I think we are now entering into a time where civic leadership is no longer going to be about just who you vote for. People are really starting to zoom in on corporations and challenge their values and attaching their values that they put on their website to their civic engagement. Who are you corporately sponsoring? What corporations are behind what candidates? And do these candidates reflect my values? Do these candidates reflect the communities that frequent your business or patronize your company? And I think civic leaders are going to have to reach out to people like me and get involved in community so that they can do what I said is the biggest civic responsibility we have, and that is to listen first. I think we have branded business in a way that it is absent of what community actually wants. We've branded businesses and branded our products to market to people for them to become consumers of it, but we are not ready for what is next. We're not ready for the renaissance, right, of what corporate leadership is going to require. Corporate leadership is no longer just going to be about spreadsheets. It's no longer going to be about them just being able to, make a few dollars here. They're like, corporate leaders need to get leadership branding and they need to get community engagement support, because it is literally about to be about what people feel. And I can, if you got more time, I can really speak to how we saw that play out in the New York election.
Oh, girl. Okay, listen.
So
let me get comfortable, baby, because I got a whole article brewing about Mr. Mamdani, but go ahead.
So, first of all, Mamdani is a democratic socialist, which goes against everything that most corporations value, because it is about getting taxed more to make sure that the people who use your services have more money to buy your stuff. And I'm putting that in very layman's terms because I don't want to get into the isms and nasms. But when you really dissect who voted for Mamdani, even though his messaging was about free buses and free this and free that, it was very working class focused. It was middle class people who elected him. It was people like me. It was people who are six-figure earners, who are business owners, who did the right thing. The people who pulled themselves up by their invisible bootstraps, went to college, didn't get pregnant in college, go to church every Sunday, read the newspaper. It was people like me, people who did all of those things right, only to get here and find out the economy is trash, you can't afford a house, it's going, Lord forbid you try to fix a tooth. There are no good men out here.
Hold on.
There are good men out here, but I'm generalizing, right? I'm sorry. There are good men out here, but when you think about the generalized statement, let's be real. Black women out-earn black men at percentages higher than any other race. So that's what I mean when I say that. Like, we have been put in a position where we're out-earning our men, and it's all intentional. We didn't vote for Mamdani. We voted against the system. We voted against the system that we actually did the right thing. Y'all gave us the inputs. We went to college. Now we got student loan debts to our eyeballs. We worked and earned our way up the corporate ladder. Now we still can't afford to buy a house. We still can't afford to live the lifestyle that we want to live, even if you're earning six figures in places like New York. We voted against the system because it's not working. It's not working in the way that they promised us it's working. So that's my own personal belief. I think that the working class people, yes, some of them voted for Mondamne, but if you look at the numbers, it was middle class folks that elected him.
It's a lesson. It is a lesson to all those who are currently in the political landscape as far as, current elected candidates and those who aspire to be. I think there are a lot of lessons too. I won't belabor the point in the strategy of how those ideals were communicated and the massive differentiation with how political campaigns are usually branded.
I was just about to say the leadership branding around him is a masterclass.
It was 5-star, top shelf, chef's kiss. I mean, it was almost flawless.
It was relatable, and the thing about New York is the biggest city in the country, right, by population, and it has like this big city charm that almost forces New York mayors to think globally. But he made everything very local. And as someone in Nashville who is in a little big city, right? Yep. We oftentimes are associated with things so much bigger and broader and outside of the city that when you hear a candidate really lean into Nashville, it almost connects with you in ways that makes it hard for you to say you don't support this person, right? I mean, even Freddie's campaign was centered in, I want you to stay. I want you to be able to stay here. I'm going to ride the bus in Nashville. I'm going to do these things. I think the branding around Mondamne was just, oh my God, it was just good.
I mean, when I say flawless, I mean like down to the aesthetic of the colors, the typography, like it was quintessential New York in every way. All of the boroughs, it was very, very well done, even down to the video, social media content, the frequency of it, I won't even get into his cadence, pace, and way of communicating, which is a skill. And I think, a lot of people think like, oh, you have to just have it. You have to just be charismatic. Yes. The Tequilas of the world are born with this innate quality to be able to communicate. And the Brittany's of the world, let me be very clear, I know who I am, right? There are some things that are just quintessential, like, I call it like divine deposits, like they're gifts, right? That are God-given. It's like you get to show up in them, but they are also developed. Like I am a product of Toastmasters. Like you practice it. Like it's not just that you just show up with the skill set and so you just have it. And if you don't have it, well, you're out of luck. Like, no, you can develop those things. And so his from the speech writing to the delivery to, I mean, it was just so well done. I think that's the piece that I hope more political leaders across the spectrum, like partisan preferences aside, like take note and understand that, again, beyond your partisan preference, that is what people are yearning for. That level of authenticity, that level of differentiation, that level of personalization in how a campaign is run. That makes the difference in the outcomes.
And that goes back to my original point that it wasn't politics as usual.
At all.
It really felt people power, even down to his community engagement. When I hear people talk about community engagement, it's usually like, oh, I'm at the place, right? I'm in this building, I'm at the table, I'm at the event. But he went to places that weren't places that you needed to be seen to be considered affluent. He wasn't at ribbon cuttings for big businesses. He wasn't, sitting at the table in the office of the mayor. He wasn't doing those things. He was at the club. He was like on the bus. He was in places where the people are. And and he wasn't taking pictures for social media. The viral clips that we seen from him came from other people.
Yeah.
And that is real community engagement.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're tired of politics as usual.
Yeah.
And it's changing.
It is changing in Nashville and beyond. And we're grateful that we have leaders like you that are leading the charge and showing us how it's done. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having
on
me,
this
Brittany.
show.
It's been an amazing conversation.
Likewise. All right. We'll see y'all on the next episode.